let me go right to the point on a particular issue, because one of the questions is a legitimate question, is it feels kind of undefined. You know, we know human rights, but really what is it? And I'm still defining it. Let me talk about Burge directly. I was involved in the very first Burge case. I was working at part of the People's Law Office in 1998. I'm sorry, 1988. About we got this request from Andrew Wilson. I get them mixed up. There's Andrew and Jackie Wilson. These are two young men who had killed 2 police officers on the south side of Chicago in 1983. And Andrew Wilson, probably Jackie as well, was tortured at the police station. And when you see, we saw pictures of him later where he had been laid up against a radiator, he had been shot, all of that. So he asked us to represent him in a lawsuit. So we had we had internal discussion about it, because clearly these 2 brothers had murdered 2 police. And most of the work we were doing at People's Law Office at the time was supporting various movements on the ground. Of course, when I got there in '83, they had developed quite a tradition. They filed the well-known case against the city and the government in the Fred Hampton case. We were represented, when I got there, the very active Puerto Rican independence movement. So that's what the office was about, supporting movement and suing cops. And as you all know, that's what I do, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's an important point that I should make at this juncture. Whatever you're doing on the ground, I sue police. I defend people in the federal court primarily. This human rights movement that I'm talking to you about doesn't mean you stop doing what you're doing. It means you keep doing what you're doing. I'm not going to stop suing cops. I don't care what you say. But this human rights framework allows me to expand what I'm doing. Let me tell you what we did in John Burge's case. We sued the cops. We sued John Burge in 1989. While our team was on trial in the federal court in front of Judge Duff. And some of y'all know about Judge Duff. We started getting calls from police, anonymous calls, talking about this is the tip of the iceberg. You haven't seen anything yet. We said, what the hell are they talking about? You see enough right here. Then we started getting letters from inmates all over the state. From a year, it happened to me too. Now when you think about that, think about it this way. Here we are getting letters from all over the state of prisoners. They didn't know each other. How would they know to talk about a black box that had a cord and a device, a generator that would generate large volts of electricity that were used with a cable and clamp that they clamped to these young men's earlobes, testicles, penises, and then they cranked the electricity into their body. How would all of them know about that? There was no way. But then the other part to think about, these young men, and they're probably over 200, were going to court after confessing to crimes they didn't commit. And they were, if they had a lawyer that wasn't incompetent, they were filing a motion to suppress the statement, because that's what you do. If you keep the statement out, you got a chance to beat the case. But if you have a case where you have confessed, quote unquote, you're gone. You're gone. No jury finding you not guilty if they put on evidence that you confessed. That's counterintuitive. So all of them were found guilty because they confessed, as far as the jury is concerned, after they were tortured for days and days and days. And so here these young men are, going to prison, over and over. they filed a motion in front of judges largely at 26th Street and probably Martin, because those are the two major courts. And think about this. Before they get indicted, there's an assistant state's attorney goes and takes a statement. They call that felony review. That's after they get tortured. As they get tortured into submission, then the detectives call the felony review young assistant to take the statement. Now, these assistants knew what was going on after a while. They weren't stupid. I mean, the detectives knew what was going on. This was Area 2 on the south side of Chicago. Now, here we are at 26 in California. I'm saying over probably 200. These young men are testifying that they were shot with a box that they call a nigger box. How many judges heard that? How many heard it? Some of them heard it over and over. No judge said, wait a minute. I heard this last week about these same officers out of Area 2. Nobody said, wait a minute. I'm going to call the state's attorney or somebody because something's going wrong here. Over and over, dozens and dozens. They just sit there, rule against them. They're gone. Some of them end up on death row, at least 5 or 6. Most of them got life, some of them got 3 or 4 life sentences. And they were all going to rot in prison, and many of them were going to be executed. And these judges are sitting there. State's attorney know about it, many judges, if they were just not, totally dumb, to figure it out after a while, they didn't know about it. We've learned later that the state's attorney, when Jackie and Andrew was tortured, a doctor who examined the body with the torture wounds reported it to the state's attorney, thinking that this is what you do because the state's attorney should step in and start looking around. Well, the state's attorney happened to be Richard Dallas. He closed it down, did nothing. And many more were tortured after that because he did nothing. He could have investigated and prosecuted somebody, but police don't get prosecuted in Chicago. There have been 2 that I'm aware of, and I helped the first one get prosecuted. You all may remember Joseph Gould in 1995 was shot to death by Gary Becker, a police officer who was out with his girlfriend, and Joseph Gould, a homeless man, was putting water on his windshield. You know how the brothers do, trying to get a little money. He pulled a gun and shot him. Got in the car with the girlfriend, drove off. Well, we got him and sent him to prison. The first one, probably in the history of Scotland. Now, police go to prison. They go for stealing, they go for shaking down drug dealers, they go for all kinds of stuff, but they don't go for killing black folks. They don't go for killing black folks, but he went for killing black folks. So, the point then is, everybody knew about it. We learned recently that George Dunn knew about it. He was head of the county board. So it's why I know, that something going on. They just torture these black courts in the prison. So we did everything to get justice for the torture victims and try to prosecute those who had committed the crime. We had rallies, we had post-conviction petitions, we filed lawsuits, we had hearings in the city council, we had more than one. We had hearings at the county board. We had hearings there, everywhere we have a hearing, we had a hearing. We went to the Justice Department, locally, U.S. Attorney's Office. Some of us went to Washington, D.C. to talk to the Attorney General. We tried to get the state's attorney. Every state's attorney that entered that office, we tried to get them to step in and do something. All of them, none of them did nothing. So, and this is a personal story, so you don't have to share it. It just happened that I broke my ankle in January 2005. And I was at home, I couldn't go out because the doctor told me that if you go out with that cast on, you get water inside of it. You know you have water inside because you can't scratch it, but you'll be itching. I said, well, I ain't gonna have that happen, doctor. Don't worry about it. I'm staying in. And as fate would have it, I was listening to public radio every day, and I don't have time to listen to public radio every day, but I did. They were talking about torture. Albert Gray was going to talk about hey. I think, we charge genocide, and Malcolm talked about it. And so what happened, Aaron Hallison got indicted. Yeah, we got him out off Jeff Road. We got indicted, and we wanted to talk about how we're going to defend Aaron because he was our crime. So I couldn't go out, so I invited all of my boy colleagues to my apartment. So Flynn, Michael, all the PLO, People's Office, not the Palestinian Liberation, came to the house, came to the apartment, right? And we talked about the strategy, the defense strategy. And as they were leaving, I said, guys, I'm thinking we need to take this case to international law because we were at a stalemate at that time. We had got a special prosecutor and he wasn't doing anything, and we were just waiting, trying to figure out, okay, so what are we going to do now? And people kind of looked at me like, they really hurt his ankle. I'm like, international, whatever. And I had no idea. I didn't know there were treaties. I just knew I was for human rights. I didn't know there were reporting requirements. I didn't know none of that, so I started asking around. I'm doing research. And I called Doug Capsule, because he was an expert. He wasn't available enough to sit down and talk, so I reached out to Susan Sash, who was at the University of Chicago. And we met, and we kind of figured it out. So we filed the first petition to the Organization of American States in 2005. So they have an Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And we said, well, we'll file it, they give us a hearing, we'll get a busload of community people and go to Washington, D.C. That's quicker than going to Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva, Switzerland trip is much more structured. Every 4 years the treaty starts. So we did. They gave us here, we headed to D.C. It just happened to be, what was it called? It's like the second million, it wasn't second million man march, but it was the second march. And it was in, I think, late August, and we were there, and our people were coming in. And so they were coming, to do that second one. So this is 2005, fall 2005. We were there, got there a few days early. And it was interesting for me as a lawyer, because I do trials, I'm arguing before the judges and jurors and all that stuff. When we go there, we met with a lot of press, which is what we wanted, and we met by a member of the State Department. And we just told them, that's right, we're suing the United States now. So it wouldn't be state's attorneys or none of that stuff, it's the State Department. This is international stuff. And they said we were in a conference room, and we had a hearing. There were 3 judges, and these judges were from the Organization of American States. So they were from different countries. And so it was different from going to federal court arguing in front of one of those judges. Because they don't hear you have it. These, one was from Chile, one was from Uruguay, and I forget what other. And we researched them. And it just happened that the one from Chile had been a victim of Pinochet. He had been tortured. So, all right, we got one now, it's going to be about And we made the argument. And they were very receptive. And after we had our argument, and the State Department was just taking notes. I mean, what are they going to do? They had to report back. They couldn't argue about anything, right? It was me, Flint, Bernadine, I think Michael was there. It was good. And so we just had an informal chat after it was over. They just told us, we'll do a report, but we really don't have money to do very much. Or, we'll get publicity, and that's what we got. And so that was the beginning of it. 2006, and this is the more important part, we got an invitation by the U.S. Human Rights Network to go to Geneva, Switzerland, because the Committee Against Torture was having their hearing. With this reporting thing. So I could not go. I had a appellate argument in 7th Circuit, so you can't file a vote and say, look, I got to go to Switzerland. They don't play that. So I couldn't go. Fortunately, Joy Mola could go, so she went and she did an excellent job. And what she came back with, after they have the hearing in the United States, they do what is called a concluding observation. In May of 2006, the conclusions or recommendations of the committee, paragraph 25, in essence says, the committee notes the limited investigation, lack of prosecution with respect to allegations of torture perpetuated in Area 2 and 3 of Chicago Police Department. And so they directed the United States to do something. This went all over the world. This is international. So now the United States is on Front Street. And this is in 2006. And this is private, because I will share this with everybody. I got a call from the assistant U.S. attorney who had to prosecute the case. And the reason he called me is because that's why I do my work. I had litigated against him. I think the case I had with him, I was representing Willie Lloyd. You know, he's a friendly guy. He said, Stan, you know, we just got this. Can you come over and talk to us? Sure. So I got Flynn and Lyle, we went over and talked to them. And we shared with them how they could do it, because the events of torture, the act's statute of limitation had run. It's 5 years. So we had collected data on depositions and interrogatories in civil cases where Burge and the detectives had taken depositions and answered interrogatories. And we found out it was a federal criminal violation if you lied on that. And so we had a whole list of Burge detectives when they had done their last deposition or interrogatories. You count 5 years. If there's still time, you could get them. And that's how they got John Burge. But there were a bunch of other detectives that they could have gotten, and they just let the time go by. So they still playing the game. Yeah. You know? He was symbolic. We got him, so they ought to shut up. Well, we ain't gonna shut up. We got him bolder now. We know how to get him. And so then John Burge gets indicted within about 7 or 8 months after this. It's a connection. We had 2.5 decades he didn't get indicted, so after this. Now, I don't know what kind of discussion they had. I don't know what kind of discussion they had at the White House, at the State Department, but if I was a fly on the wall, it probably was something like that. Look, we don't need the embarrassment of having all those young black men and boys tortured, and we don't do nothing, not that the world know about it. John Burge ain't that important, whoever he is. He's just Chicago cop. It ain't that serious. Get it. And they got it. It's a symbolic victory, but it gave us, it showed us how to do it. And since then, I'm saying we got to keep learning how to do it. We got to really learn, and this is the other part of it. In January 2010, this is Committee Against Torture. This is like the follow-up, because they have to do this every 4 years. So this is list of issues prior to submission of the 5th periodic report of the United States of America. So the United States got to report again. So they're saying, when you report in 2011, this is what we want to know. And what they say, for example, and again, paragraph 25, as requested by the committee in its previous concluding observation, please provide updated information on the investigations and prosecution related to the alleged torture perpetrated in the areas 2 and 3 of the Chicago Police Department pursuant to paragraph 25. So if you don't remember what we talked about, go back to 2006 and look at paragraph 25, where we told you what you need to do, right? In this respect, please provide detailed information on the charges filed against John Burge, if applicable, on the outcome of this case. Furthermore, please indicate any other police officers, if any other police officers have been brought to justice in this case. So now what do? The CAT reporting at the end of this year. I will be preparing to respond to them, because I know what the United States is going to say. We indicted John Burge. I'm going to say, yeah, they did. But they didn't indict the other 50. Nothing else. So that's how we confront them. And I'm going to try to even go to Geneva, Switzerland, so I can be there when they grill the United States on this issue.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of accountability part of it. So this is some pretty powerful stuff. It's powerful in that the United States has ignored most international forums. And the only reason that they're not ignoring this, I'm totally convinced, is because Americans are slowly getting involved in the process. This is one of the few countries that really doesn't have a viable human rights movement. We talk human rights, and we believe in human rights, but we ain't got no movement. We don't know the treaties. How many people knew there were actual treaties and reported all that until we started talking about it more recently? I didn't. Well, I know you did. But so you learn it. It's a learning curve. So I use them now. And I have used it. There's a new treaty that's been kind of imposed by the United Nations, whether you sign on to it or not. It's called the Universal Periodic Review. So all countries, all member countries, and all countries are members of the United Nations, I believe, have to be examined under this treaty. The United States was examined in 2010 for the first time, because it just came into existence in 2009. They're going to be examined again next year. Now, by now, this is 2010, I know what's going on, right? So I filed a petition, me and a sister out of LA. I drafted it primarily. And the petition was to raise the issue of COINTELPRO political prisoners. Our brothers and sisters who went down as a result of COINTELPRO's counterintelligence program that was used to stop the movement in the black community, in particular in the 60s and 70s, focusing on black youth, led by CORE, led by the Black Panther Party and other groups, to break the back of those movements. And of course they did. They murdered a bunch of them, like Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, a bunch of them on the West Coast, and a bunch of them are still in prison. So I filed a petition to the United Nations on that issue. So don't get me started. We be raising issues all over the place. Now the interesting thing about that review, unlike the other treaties where they have these experts, this review, the universal review, the experts are the member states, right? So when you do that one, you actually have to lobby states to raise your issue when the United States goes to Geneva, Switzerland. And that's not that easy. So what I did, because you're not talking to just experts, people in academia, that's what some of the other commissions. So I reached out to states that I thought might want to be critical of the United States. So I reached out, I had some contacts, right? I reached out and met with the Venezuelan consul. I reached out to the Cubans. So I figured, they're going to be there because it's all member states. The United States can't do like they do here, keep the Cubans away. Right? They're in Geneva, and the United States is being examined. So I reached out to all of them. And indeed, on the issue of torture, I didn't do it, but it made sense to have done it. You can reach out to some Western European countries that don't like torture, and they'll be critical. But I reached out to those I know would be critical, and it was raised. So it's all of these treaties are coming up. CAT, the one we're talking about now, I think is in October. People can get involved in preparing petitions around that, and mobilizing people and educating people on it. The universal one, I think, is in January, February. So these are learning opportunities for us to do what's called stakeholders reports, which comes from NGOs or community-based groups. They even have, it's not uncommon to have a stakeholders report coming from a community. When we talked about doing that. A stakeholder report from the Chicago black community on issues that we want to talk about. So we might talk about mass incarceration and how it's affected our community. We might talk about the human rights violations related to closing of all the black schools. And they're massive. But we don't know they're massive because we're not into it yet. For example, there were huge cultural violations that were human rights violations. Think about all the schools that were named after our ancestors and the closing of them guys. What impact did they have on our children? We wanted them there because we wanted to have impact on our children, because we wanted them to emulate our ancestors and our people that were in industry. I went to Crane High School. They said that dude made toilet students. How the hell am my children going to emulate them? But naming schools after DuSable and Rosa Parks and all that, and then you tear them down, and they're gone with all the artwork in the schools that were given the images. That's a human rights violation. But since we don't know human rights, we just say, well, why did they do that? That's horrible. But it's more than horrible. It's a human rights violation. And then sending them across these various territories, putting these children in danger. You know, that's the rights of the child. Maybe that's why they don't sign them. You know, and this just occurred to me recently. I was listening to Florence Cox, used to be at the Chicago School Board. She's raised the issue of the state, Illinois, passed a law saying that African American history must be in the public curriculum. 1992. But it ain't. That's a human rights violation. How you going to deny our children the history of their people? So all of those gets into the nuts and bolts of human rights. And you raise those, and if you raise them in a kind of mass way, we're talking about connecting with other people, the same thing is happening. Then I believe these commissions will make note of that, and the United States has to deal with it. So that's kind of the essence of what we're talking about. But again, it's just another layer of work that we have to do. It don't mean you can stop doing anything. It means that you got to pick up, and really we really are changing the paradigm in a sense. You know, a long time ago, in the late 40s, our people tried to take the Negro question to a human rights level. And I know you guys know about this. And it was pushed back primarily by Eleanor Roosevelt. And probably it had a lot to do with the Democratic Party. One of their main bases was in the South. And those Dixiecrats that we used to call them, they didn't want nobody coming down there saying what they were doing to their Negroes in the South. And she pushed back. She threatened to resign from the national board. She was on the national board in the NAACP. And it worked. And there's a very good book by Professor Carol Anderson called Eyes Off the Prize. Eyes Off the Prize. You know what Eyes on the Prize is? It's a great series on civil rights. Well, what she's trying to say is we had to take our eyes off the prize of human rights, and then we were stuck just with civil rights. The civil rights just don't give us much, as our ancestors understood back in the 40s. It's just not broad enough. You know, you could sue somebody, but that's not enough. You can't sue somebody on the civil rights because they closed down schools because you got your ancestors named after them. But you could raise it as a human rights violation. So I guess I should be shutting up soon, but let me finish the agenda here because we want to have some dialogue before it gets too late. Let me talk about what's happening with Burge torture cases briefly, because I'm very concerned with what's going on here. I was one of the people who organized, I guess the lead organizer of Black People Against Police Torture back in 2005, 2006. Now, those of you that know me and have worked with me over the years know that I'm very committed to my community because this is where I got my life. I grew up on the west side of Chicago. I was nurtured by my people. And so even though I have comrades in all communities that I work with and have worked with and continue to work with, I always come back to the base because I know that my people will give me guidance on how I should be moving because I'm totally accountable to my community, and I think that's appropriate. And that's where I'll always be. If people don't like that, just don't like it. But most of my comrades understand that I ain't the spook sitting by the door. when I come back and sit down with them, I really am bringing my people with me because I'm accountable to my people. And I could go back to my people and call a meeting like this. So I'm worth more in the total scheme of things. And so we organize. And one of the ideas is when you bring black people together, and they had not been together on the torture cases. They had been going on for 2 decades, and nobody organized black folks. And so black folks have to have a vehicle so they can express their geniuses and their concerns. And the black people against police torture was that vehicle. It didn't exclude anybody, but it was predominantly black. And so out of that group came the protests against the Olympics. We were one of the first. We called the Olympics coming to the torture capital of the world. Couldn't do that. And then other people joined in at different, but we were keeping it in the human rights framework. We even brought John Carlos down in the press conference. You all remember John Carlos, right? Olympian. One of the Olympians that did this at the Olympics. And it sparked around the world. We put the Illinois Torture Commission into place. This is a legislative stroke of genius as far as I'm concerned. And so I drafted it. We took people to Springfield in 2 bus loads to get it passed. We had never done that before. But we were, you know, the people were saying, look, we got to do more than just file lawsuits, Stan Willis. You know, they ain't getting us no place. Because the issue is empowerment. Lawsuits don't necessarily empower my people. So I try to, you know, they're there. I know how to do it. But organizing people and helping people mobilize does empower the people. And so going to Springfield and getting in the legislature's face on issues, this is critical, on issues that usually law enforcement run down there. You don't do nothing about criminal justice in Springfield because law enforcement and the State's Attorneys Association run it. Well, we went down and we ran it. We pushed it through, but almost without opposition. And I think that tells us something. We need to be more organized in these various areas like Springfield on issues that are critical to our people. So we got it passed. But what's happening to it, we got it passed, I think it was August in 2010, where when, I think it was acting government, finally signed it on the last day of the veto session. Then in the bill, it required the governor to appoint the commissioners so they can start reviewing cases of those that were in prison that had been tortured. And he's supposed to have done it in 90 days. So we figured, well, okay, by October, the commission will be in place and they can start working. Well, he didn't do that. He didn't even name it. He ignored it. For a whole year, it was lost. Until John Burt's on trial, then he named him right quick. So he's a jerk. So we brought out to vote for him, but he's a jerk. Then on top of that, the next year, 2011, the legislative body pulled back the funding. I mean, what's going on? We got people that are in prison that were tortured. How you gonna pull the fund? It wasn't a lot of money. I think like 20,000 or something. Right. You know, it's chump change in terms of overall, but they pulled the money back. So we got in a car, me and Salia got in a car, went down there trying to get the money back. And Harriet. And finally we got some of the money back. Now last year, somebody don't like this commission. We had a director of the commission. We got one of the committee right. Maybe I should have said this, right?
No, you can say it.
Okay. Because they're just with the commission. The commission has lawyers. It's chaired by a retired judge. This is the commission. It has community people on the commission that's deciding these cases. Because we're talking about empowerment. So community, we got to be on that because they're community, right? And we have one of them here. And so last year, David Thomas, our director, who's doing a great job.
Yes.
I've known him for years. He's my professor in law school. They go after David because in the act, I put in there that when a person is making claims of torture, it's being reviewed to see if that person is indeed tortured. Because if he was, then this case goes over to the chief judge and is sent out, hopefully, for a new trial.
Right.
And that's the scheme of things, right? That the directive was to notify the family of the murdered victim. Now, it was a mistake to put it in there, but I was looking at templates. I was looking at a law that was passed in North Carolina called the Innocence Commission. And in the context of an Innocence Commission, it makes some sense to notify the family. So I said, okay, well, why not notify the family? So I put it in there. Well, David didn't notify the family. So what happens? Anita Alvarez picks up on it and says, what's going on here? They didn't notify the family. She brought the families in. Now, why did she do that? Because she was the one that tried one of the torture victims. So this makes her very nervous. And so then, who chimes in after that? This dumb governor. He ordered David to resign.
Yes.
Wait a minute. It's not even that important. What's the deal, you know? And David ended up resigning. Now it's being taken over by an ex-prosecutor. And now they're talking about they're going to change the law so a member of the murdered family can be on the commission to continue to derail. So it's going like, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. And on top of that, there's a class action was filed by some of my comrades, and Judge Beeble kind of embraced it. So he's appointed administrator of one of the law schools to review all the torture cases. And so I think somebody in Springfield, probably somebody from law enforcement, said, well, why do we need this now? We got, you know, that commission, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to say, well, we ain't got no money for that if that's already going on. The problem is, there are no community people involved in that. I got a letter from one of the torture victims, Kilroy Watkins, kind of angry at me, saying, Stan, you know, you part of this, tell me about this. Well, I really wasn't. It was my comrades, though. And what he's saying, he got a letter from this administrator saying he doesn't qualify because he was tortured after John Burge was fired. And that's bull. But that's the way they're going. And I said, wait a minute. He was tortured after John Burge was fired. How many times have I defended people in the federal court under conspiracies that were charged against them? And some of the leaders or whoever leave the conspiracy, but the conspiracy continues, and all of them get indicted and go to prison. So how is this different? I ain't getting it. So I think we're going to have to do what we call a legal memorandum to this professor at the law school. The bottom line is they're trying to get away. They're trying to ease past these torture victims. They would like to just leave them in prison.
Yes.
They don't want to see no more cops go to prison. You know, and we have to stop it. And I have to blame us in the black community because we're not doing enough with these torture victims. I mean, really. This is one of the most egregious, serious acts almost since enslavement. When you think about it. They torture babies. Really. Some of these torture victims are 14 years old. They sent them to prison. They sent people to death row and were willing to sit back and let them be executed. And we think probably over 200. Torture, there are 3 violations that the international community does not tolerate. Let me try to remember all 3. One is genocide. One is slavery. And the third one is torture. No community, no state tolerates torture. And we talking about torture in the black community involving black boys and black men. And it's not just them. And I think you understand this because I recognize the mothers of these victims. When even if your kid goes to jail and they did it, if you a father or mother, you hurt. But if they didn't do it, you die inside. Communities die when that happens. We won't get over this for a long time. Too many families have been hurt.
Yes.
And we're not doing enough. We're just not doing enough. We're sad about it. It's a terrible thing, but we're not doing enough about it. This is a major crime that people all over the world know about, and we're not doing enough in Chicago to make sure. We should have, and maybe the petition will begin to, we should have as a major issue in this gubernatorial election, in every other election, the issue of torture of black men, black boys. And indeed, now Latino young men as well. Should be on everybody's list. If you want to get elected, you got to deal with this issue. If you don't deal with this issue, you might as well go back doing whatever you're doing, because you won't be running government. And this Quinn, I don't know what y'all gonna do about it. I mean, you got a crazy man running against him. He gonna tear up all the unions and all that. So I'm a union person. But Quinn is bad news. But we got to deal with it, right? And I really think if we put it on him, because he kind of mind you have some experience. But it seems like when you pressure him a little bit, he's like, okay, I'll do it, right? So we need to pressure him.
Yeah.
So this gets to the short-term thing that I was talking about, and then we're going to have some discussion around time. I believe that I can't ask you to, let's start meeting and organize, because I've been there before. Black people can torture, you know, we met every month, sometimes twice a month. When we had organized some years ago, African American Freedom Movement, me, Abu Jamal, we met and met and met. And I'm running in a law office, I can't do that too long. After a while, I'm just too tired. So this is what I'm proposing. I think if I propose to you, let's do a short-term expression of our rage and see what happens. In other words, let's agree to do something within 30 days or 60 days at most. So most people say, well, you know, I think I can handle that. It ain't too much work, right? And I'm thinking about something like a letter writing campaign, you know, maybe to the governor, in terms of those that are being tortured in prison because they're in isolation, to the prison ward, and to the person who runs the Illinois Department of Corrections. Letters, email, blogs, all of that. Phone calls, we may say, well, on such and such a day at 3 o'clock, we're going to call the director of the prison and tell them how outraged we are. And then, of course, put pressure on our legislators, particularly our black community. Many of them are bad news. I mean, really. I'm always embarrassed by them. Not all of them. Some of them work very hard. Many of them are bad news. And I hate to say this in front of our guests, but they are bad news. But I think on this issue, we said, look, you got to deal with this. You know, Kwame Raoul stepped up to get the torture bill in place. He and our attorney had to nug our attorney a little bit, but you can put it in place after a while. So we have to put it to them. This is critical. This is really critical. People around the world are watching us here in Chicago. They know we got John Burge indicted, right? But they try to figure out, well, so what are you going to do about those people that died in prison? That's right. Many of them will die, because many of them got 3, you can't, if you get 3 life sentences, you ain't getting out. You know, you can't live a 1 life, and they know that, they give you 3 lives. So we got to do something. We got to do it within our faith community, sororities, fraternities, block clubs, you know, whatever you got, whatever you have socially connected with, you got to do it there. So we could turn this around, but we got to do it. And we got to build a human rights movement. And I think I got to shut up, I want to share with you. So what we want to do is, let me make sure I've covered everything, because I don't want to come and say, oh, I want to talk to brothers and sisters about that. I told you about the political prisoners. Yeah, pretty much. So let's have some discussion. If you look at your outline, and we don't have a lot of time, We're gonna have a question and answer, but we're not gonna have any speeches. And if you start giving me a speech, you know, I'm crazy. I'll tell you, shut up. So that's fine. But I know my brothers, so they get, well, you know, and they go on and on and on. They be going longer than I just went. So questions, and we're going to respond. We're really trying to get more. I mean, the purpose of town hall meeting is so community come together and try to deal with what are the issues. Bob Starks was first, and then we'll go. Bob.
Could you just point out the role of two of our graduates from Northeastern here at the Center for Inner City Studies, Dr. Coy Pugh, and forcing the governor to have a moratorium on execution, Governor Ryan, and then later, Karen Yarborough sponsoring the bill to outlaw the death penalty in Illinois.
Right.
All coming out of the movement that you started.
Yeah. Well, Coy